This morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The morning light filtered through the curtains, and the silence of Melbourne's streets wrapped around me in a way that felt unsettling. I'm a literature professor at the University of Melbourne, a job that, to many, might seem prestigious. But in truth, I'm like this city, eroded by time, stained by the choices I've made. It all started with my son, Sam. He's 18, just got accepted to study law at the University of Melbourne. When I saw him holding that acceptance letter, I should have felt proud. That's the normal response, isn't it? But all I felt was a sting. Something bitter rose up in my throat. And then anger. No, not just anger. It was envy. I looked at him, so young, full of life, and something inside me twisted. I saw in him the youth that slipped through my fingers, the opportunities that never came my way, everything I failed to achieve. Sam had a bright future ahead of him, while I remained stagnant, stuck in a mediocre career. I was born and raised in Fitzroy, an old and vibrant suburb of Melbourne, full of history and tradition. I remember the wide streets, the bohemian cafes, and the Victorian houses. I was a child of the neighbourhood, surrounded by a blend of modernity and decay, buildings that bore witness to a glory that would never return. The same happened to me. I was once a promising writer, but for some reason, I never made it anywhere. Sam, on the other hand, had everything, and it gnawed at me inside. Around the time Sam started his classes, something inside me changed. I began to feel more energetic. It wasn't just psychological. My body, which used to ache at the end of the day, now felt stronger, as if the weight of the years was lifting. At the same time, Sam started to look more tired, more worn out. It wasn't just the stress of his studies. There was something deeper, something that was draining his vitality. And I knew somehow that it was connected to me. One night after dinner, while Sam was lying on the couch, exhausted, something disturbing happened. I was sitting next to him, watching him without meaning to. My thoughts wandered, steeped in my own resentment, and then it happened. I felt a strange sensation of warmth in my chest, a discomfort that quickly spread, filling me with an unsettling euphoria. Sam squirmed beside me, groaning as if he were in invisible pain. I watched him intently, a shiver running down my spine. He clutched his chest as if he were suffocating, and I, frozen in morbid curiosity, just watched like it was a scene in a play, something distant, unreal. In the next moment, I felt better. I felt lighter. Sam, however, was pale and weak, as though something had been drained from him. I asked him if he was okay, more out of formality than genuine concern, and he just mumbled that he was tired. Nothing more. Weeks passed, and Sam started to wither. He woke up with body aches, nausea, and no doctor could figure out what was wrong. Test after test, and nothing. Meanwhile, I felt a strange renewal in me. I, who had lived with chronic pain and would wake up with a stiff back, now felt new. Sometimes, when I passed by the mirror, I thought my skin even looked less worn. Sam, however, seemed to age. The first time I realized something more concrete was happening was when I woke up in the middle of the night. I went to the kitchen for a glass of water and saw something that froze me. Apparently, Sam had gotten up in the middle of the night and was sitting at the table, motionless. But his eyes were closed. He was there, but not really there, like a puppet whose strings had been cut but remained upright by sheer inertia. I called his name, but he didn't respond. I approached him, and when I touched him, I felt a sharp pain, like an electric current that made me pull back. It wasn't a normal shock. It was hot, almost burning. And then Sam opened his eyes as if he had woken from a trance. He looked at me confused and asked what he was doing in the kitchen. I told him he had gotten up in the middle of the night. He just laughed and went back to bed without saying another word. These episodes repeated themselves, becoming more frequent, and the feeling that I was somehow draining something from him, that I was in fact feeding off his vitality, started to solidify in my mind. And the most disturbing part, I couldn't stop. I should have felt guilty. I should have been desperate to find a solution. But the truth is, I felt good. I felt alive again. And with every new collapse of his, I felt as if a weight was being lifted off my shoulders. It was like I was being reborn every time he weakened. The last time it happened was at my wife's funeral, Sam's mother. She passed away suddenly with no plausible medical explanation. A quick, inexplicable death. Sam was in shock, as we all were, but I felt something different. The moment she was buried, I felt an intense surge of energy inside me, as if something was being transferred into my body. A warmth began to radiate from my chest, and I knew at that moment that what was happening to Sam had also happened to her. That's when I realized, perhaps I was the cause of all this. And yet, I couldn't stop. With every loss I suffered, I became stronger. What does it mean? I don't know, but now Sam is in the hospital, and I'm here alone, feeling more alive than ever. There's something rotten inside me, something I can't fully understand. Perhaps it's the weight of an envy that has rooted itself so deeply within me that it now manifests physically, draining the lives of those around me so that I can survive. It's something that frightens me, but at the same time, something that comforts me, and that is the real horror. I don't know how this will end. I don't know if Sam will survive. But I know that as long as he continues to fade, I will remain here strong. I should be desperate. I should be seeking redemption. But the truth is, deep down, I'm at peace with it. Because for the first time in decades, I feel like I'm in control of my own life, even if it costs others theirs. And when I think about it, I can't help but wonder, who will be next?
I've never been a man of uncontrolled emotions. I've always been meticulous, calculated. The kind of guy you see in a pristine suit on Bay Street in the heart of Toronto with a clean-shaven face and a Patek Philippe watch gleaming on his wrist. Successful. I've always been that way. But it's funny how life, no matter how perfect it seems, can hide rot. I work at the Canadian branch of one of the world's largest financial consulting firms. Numbers, strategies, projections. I've always excelled at that. Toronto is a city that rewards success. The tops of the financial district's towers seem to call to the most ambitious men, and I was one of them. I was. Until the day I met Daniel. Daniel was exactly like me but better. The kind of guy that irritates you just by being in the same room. Always smiling, charming, a commanding presence. He knew how to win people over. He joined the company a few months after I did, and somehow he managed to earn our superiors' trust in record time. Not only that, the clients loved him. He had this way of captivating anyone who crossed his path. And there was one thing about him that always annoyed me: his cologne. It was a distinctive, sophisticated scent. Notes of sandalwood mixed with bergamot, something slightly woody yet with a persistent citrus freshness like a soft breeze on a hot summer's day. Whenever Daniel entered a room, that cologne preceded him, wrapping around him like an invisible cloak of power. It wasn't overwhelming or sickly, it was subtle but unforgettable. He knew exactly what he was doing. That scent was almost hypnotic. At first, I thought it was just a curious quirk. He seemed different from any other man in the office, and that cologne was like his signature. But over time, I grew to hate it. Every time I smelled it, my stomach turned. It was as if he were marking his territory, asserting his superiority, and it ate away at me. It was at a cocktail party at the Fairmont Royal York that I realized just how much I hated Daniel. He was there, surrounded by important clients, laughing and charming them as always. And of course, that damn cologne filled the air, a constant reminder of his presence. I stood in the corner with a glass of whiskey watching, and right there, that night, something inside me snapped. Envy is a funny thing. It starts as a twinge of discomfort, and before you know it, it spreads through every part of you. I no longer saw Daniel as a colleague. He was a threat, a shadow. He had the life I deserved, the respect I had worked so hard to earn. So I decided that one way or another I would take his place. That night, after the cocktail party, I wandered over to St. Lawrence Market. I'm not sure why. I needed to think. The night was cold, the wind sharp as a blade, and the streets were empty. I walked aimlessly, passing the closed stalls, the echo of my footsteps trailing behind me. Then I saw him. Daniel. He was there in the same market, seemingly alone. He didn't see me. He was distracted, fiddling with his phone. And then, suddenly, I caught a whiff of that cologne. Even at a distance, the scent reached me. But this time, it wasn't comforting. It was oppressive, suffocating. The sandalwood smelled heavy, and the bergamot freshness had vanished, replaced by an impending sense of dread. Something inside me snapped. That night, Daniel didn't make it home. His body was found floating in Lake Ontario 2 days later. Accidental drowning, he said. He'd been out drinking, slipped on the wet shoreline, and fell. Nothing more. A tragedy. Toronto mourned him. The company grieved. But me? I felt good. I took Daniel's place as I had planned. I started getting noticed more, received more responsibilities. Everything was going as I wanted, until things started to change. The smell of Daniel, it never really left. It started slowly. A few weeks later in the office, I caught that familiar scent again. First, I thought it was just my imagination. Sensory hallucination brought on by memory. But it wasn't. It was there, in the air, persistent. And each day, the smell grew stronger. In the hallways, I'd smell the cologne before I even entered a meeting room. In the elevator, wherever I went, it was as if he were there, watching me, surrounding me. The sandalwood mixed with a bitterness that hadn't been there before. The citrusy freshness of the bergamot had vanished completely, and all that remained was a suffocating, heavy presence, like the air was infused with something invisible and malevolent. One night, I was leaving the office late when I smelled that cologne again, more intense than ever. It was as though Daniel was right behind me. I turned around. The hallway was empty. The only thing left was the scent, thick and inescapable, like a cloak of doom wrapping around me. Tried to avoid it. I started leaving early, working from home, but the scent followed me. At night, in my apartment at the One, Daniel's cologne seemed to seep through the walls, through the carpet, into my pillow. It was like he was there, beside me, smiling as he always did, and each night, the scent grew stronger, more oppressive. One night, I was jolted awake by a horrible feeling of suffocation. My eyes snapped open, and the room was dark, but Daniel's cologne filled every inch of space. It was so strong it made me nauseous. Jumped out of bed and ran to the bathroom. Standing in the doorway, the scent seemed to thicken, almost tangible, as if I could reach out and touch that invisible cloud. I turned on the shower, hoping the water would cleanse the torment, but nothing came out, only the cold, empty sound of the void, as if the scent had drained everything around me. Since then, Daniel visits me every night. He doesn't appear physically, but his cologne is always there, and I know it's him. That scent of sandalwood, once so alluring, is now a sentence. It surrounds me, traps me, and each time it appears, I feel like I'm closer to losing my mind entirely. Thought I had won. I thought Daniel was out of my way, but now I realize he never left. He's with me, and he always will be. There's nowhere I can run from his cologne, and maybe I deserve it. Because true victory isn't what you achieve, but what you can never leave behind. And Daniel, he's still here.
should never have returned to Sofia. The city always enveloped me in a suffocating atmosphere, as if every stone in the ancient streets held the whispers of the generations that had passed through. My childhood memories were never exactly happy, but the melancholy of forgotten places is irresistible to solitary souls like mine. After losing my job in Berlin, returning to Bulgaria seemed like the only option. And then there was Anna, my cousin. We hadn't seen each other in almost 10 years, but I still felt the shadow of our childhood. She was always the star, the favorite. I was the melancholic one, the quiet one. While she radiated light, I hid in the shadows. Even now, at 32, I realized she still had everything. Anna, with her blonde hair, her elegant clothes, always surrounded by friends. Meanwhile, I could barely manage a smile. Yet, when she invited me to stay in her apartment on one of Sofia's oldest avenues, Vitosha Boulevard, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps our relationship could change. Anna lived in an old building, almost forgotten by time, with large windows overlooking the ruins of Serdica. At night, I could swear I heard echoes of voices coming from those ruins, voices speaking in archaic Bulgarian, or maybe Latin. This, of course, could be my mind. But there was something more, something in the soft whispers that sometimes seemed to call my name. In the first few days, Anna was warm, attentive, always with that perfect smile. Yet I knew something was wrong. I felt a growing discomfort whenever we sat together at the cafe near the central market. People greeted her, cast admiring glances, and ignored me. It ate away at me. And then the strange things began. In Borisova Gradina Park, while we were walking, I saw something among the trees. A figure, indistinct, like a shadow. When I turned to comment to Anna, she just laughed, saying I was exaggerating. But I knew something was there. Something was watching us. On the third day, while I was alone in the apartment, I started hearing noises coming from the ruins. The wind seemed to carry something else, an almost imperceptible lament. When I opened the window, I saw a figure standing next to an ancient column, watching me from afar. I froze, trying to understand what I was seeing, but the figure disappeared before I could do anything. Things worsened that night. Anna seemed different. Her eyes sparkled with an enthusiasm that didn't match the situation. During dinner, she began to talk about an old legend involving the ruins of Serdica, a story I had never heard before. She spoke of a spirit that supposedly dwelled deep in the ruins, a spirit that fed on envy, drawing closer to those who harbored the feeling for too long. I laughed, trying to dismiss the discomfort, but that night I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, hearing whispers that seemed to come from inside the walls, as if something was trying to get closer to me, to penetrate my mind. I fought the sensation, telling myself it was just my own envy distorting my perception. However, the next morning, I woke up with strange bruises on my arms and legs, as if something had gripped me tightly during the night. When I told Anna, she looked at me with a mix of pity and superiority. "You need to relax," she said, with that condescending tone I despised. And then, the next day, Anna disappeared. I searched everywhere for her, asked the neighbors, went to the police, but nothing. It was as if she had vanished off the face of the earth. I spent sleepless nights wandering the streets of Sofia, not knowing what to do, until finally, I returned to the apartment. That's where the whispers grew louder. Every night, I heard them, stronger, clearer, and the figures in the ruins seemed to get closer and closer. I began to question my sanity. The spirit Anna had mentioned, could it be real? Was it feeding on my envy? On the final night, I decided to confront whatever it was. I grabbed a flashlight and descended into the ruins, guided by the whispers that seemed increasingly familiar. When I reached the bottom, a figure stood there, its back to me. My heart almost stopped when the figure turned around. It was Anna. Or at least it looked like Anna, but her eyes were empty, lifeless, as if there were two black voids that swallowed all the light around them. She smiled at me, but it wasn't the warm smile I knew. It was something dark, hollow, as if there was no humanity left inside her. "You called me," she said. "Now I'm part of him, and you will be next." I tried to run, but I felt something holding me, something I couldn't see. an invisible force, as if the very air was condensing around me, immobilizing me. I knew at that moment that my envy had condemned me,